Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming along tonight. I'm sure we're in for a fascinating evening this evening. We're going to be joined shortly by Sarah Crawford, who now oversees the Programmes of Scale, a relatively new programme that is of grants from the Rotary Foundation to support some of the superb work that Rotary does across the world. Now, Sarah joined the Rotary staff in July 2020. She now oversees this Programmes of Scale. I'm going to read quite a bit of her CV because it's so impressive that I wouldn't want to miss any of it. But Sarah spent the previous 10.5 years working with the Millennium Challenge Corporation, overseeing financial and private sector development programming in Honduras, El Salvador, Cape Verde, Zambia, Republic of Georgia, and Indonesia. She's worked for the US embassies in El Salvador as the Deputy Country Director and back in Washington as the Director of Strategic Partnerships. So we've got someone who's very well qualified in all that goes on in the sort of aid and support sector overseas. She's a very strong believer in the power of youth exchange and global citizenry, sorry about that. And she in fact was a Rotary Ambassadorial Scholar a little while ago to Brazil. So impressed was she and her family with this that her parents ended up joining Rotary as a result because of the great work she was doing with the Rotary clubs in Brazil in the Rotary Club at Park Ridge in New Jersey. So that's our speaker tonight, and I'm delighted to welcome her. And if Sarah can join us now, I'd like to hand over to Sarah. Thank you very much, and we very much look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here with you. It is always a thrill and an honor to be with Rotary members who are so engaged in service and the work of the Rotary Foundation. So I am just so happy to present Programmes of Scale to you. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may have heard of it very briefly, and others may have participated and formulated concept notes this year. So I hope to speak to all of you on with a varied level of knowledge and understanding and awareness of Programmes of Scale. And I'll start even with the tagline of Programmes of Scale: backed by evidence, strengthened through partnerships, because I think this was really a fundamental building block of why Programmes of Scale exists. Programmes of Scale vision is really to provide Rotary members with this next level of funding and support to realize high impact projects, attract partner organizations that have a shared vision with Rotary to achieve long-term change, as well as inform the types of programming where Rotarians are having the greatest long-term impact. So what does Programmes of Scale fund? It's focused on longer-term programs, 3 to 5 years in length, that are based in evidence, and the evidence should be both international and or local evidence, but proven models that achieve positive results, that are locally relevant, ready to grow in that community or in that place. They have a strong theory of change, that if certain investments are made, certain actors are engaged, change will in fact happen, and that is also influencing a collaborative learning structure, reflections on what's working, adjustments where it's not working, and sharing that learning more broadly. And quite importantly is a Programme of Scale has to leverage the unique strengths of Rotary members and Rotary. Programmes of Scale is a $2 million grant award, one per year afforded to a member-led team. And I like sharing this with Rotarians around the world, as these are thoughts and feedback that members who have participated in Programmes of Scale and their partners, what they say about Rotary and why they think this is an amazing program. I particularly like to call out Rotary as grassroots to grass tops. that came from one of the partner organizations in the power of why they chose to partner with Rotary on making a change initiative. So how does Programs of Scale work? It is a bit of a different grant cycle than that of what the foundation has run in the past, in that it's a two-step process. The first step is a call for concept notes. And I want to be clear here that concept notes isn't the first time that we've gathered an idea and hoping that we've gotten all of the right pieces in place, but really a concept note, it should be formulated when there is a proven model that is ready to grow, and you are sharing the concept of how you will grow a proven model with the Rotary Foundation and all of the reviewers from the cadre of technical advisors. I mentioned the cadre of technical advisors, who are the technical professional Rotarians who volunteer their time to the foundation in grant review and grant programming. And so the cadre is a key component of scoring these proposals that come into the foundation. Very few, it's a very competitive process, and so very few programs move on to the invitation for full proposal, but that is step 2, because teams are given approximately 12 weeks to finalize all implementation plans, prepare everything for this 3 to 5 years of implementation, and come back to the foundation with that full proposal. And then the decision is made. So we have a Programs of Scale selection committee, which is members who have come together with this shared vision of the longer term change afforded through Programs of Scale. And they make a recommendation to the trustees of the Rotary Foundation on this $2 million grant award. The program review criteria that we use is used at each stage of the competition. It is ready to scale. Do you have evidence that your model, your program model has worked and can work again? Are there opportunities for future scale? Is it built for sustainability? And in this case, we really look at how well integrated in or supported by local, regional, or national systems, whatever the scope of the program is, but how well those stakeholders are engaged in taking ownership and making commitments around sustainability of the programming. Also, how will this program promote learning? Are the partners ready to learn together, reflect on what's working, share that learning with Rotary members around the world who want to work on improving their service and grow their programming? And again, highlighting this concept of really represents Rotary, not just from a stewardship and strong program management and governance perspective, but really demonstrating that through the program, people of action is coming to life. Rotarians are able to volunteer directly with the program. Rotarians are using the trust that they've built in communities to make the program viable. And Rotarians are using their voice and vision for longer term change to advocate at the highest levels for this program to be sustainable and continue to bring benefits to people around the world. So what better way to demonstrate these characteristics than talking about the first awardee of Programs of Scale? So the Programs of Scale award has only been granted once thus far, and the first awardee was a group of Rotary clubs both in Washington State, United States, and 6 Rotary clubs in Zambia who are working together to eliminate malaria in Zambia. From the perspective of readiness to scale, this group had been working together in some capacity for more than 10 years in looking at different ways to support malaria elimination efforts in Zambia, from bed net programming to looking at strengthening the health system, to working and surveying what other partners and what other organizations were doing and what has been effective in malaria elimination. Building on some third-party research that was done by one of the partners in Zambia, that if a certain number of community health workers per population were trained, had the right supplies, and had the right linkages to the local health system, malaria rates do decrease significantly in a way that makes Zambia a country that could become malaria-free in short order. With that research, the program team came together and did a community assessment of different communities that would be meeting this level of coverage and had the right local health support to move into programming, and selected 10 districts in Zambia where they would train and outfit 2,500 community health workers, train and work with the health staff to be able to absorb the community health workers into the local health system and ensure that they have the right supplies, right communications, right management, right training, and also work together to mobilize local leaders, tribal leaders, faith-based leaders in what are sound malaria prevention and treatment practices to spread the community awareness of what works. They were ready to sustain this program. They're working hand in hand with the National Malaria Elimination Center and ensuring that the community health workers are completely integrated into the local health system by the end of the grant period. So this work can continue far beyond the funding that has been afforded by the foundation. Ready to learn together, this group does not have a vision of stopping with these 10 districts. So they want to make sure that they are driving down malaria rates in the most cost-effective way possible so that they can continue to work on this effort until Zambia is malaria-free. And they want to share that learning across Africa and across the Rotary world for people who care about both community health worker training programs as well as malaria prevention and treatment programs. And how do they represent Rotary? Rotarians are volunteering directly in training community health workers, certifying and becoming community health workers, and helping with the outfitting and mobilization. They're working with the local leaders on building awareness, faith-based community and tribal leaders, using their reach and trust in the community. And they're using their voices as members of the End Malaria Now Council in Zambia and advocating for the sustainable long-term change of malaria elimination in Zambia. The first award went into place 6 months ago. And in that time, even with COVID shutdowns, they have been able to train more than 800 community health workers, outfit them and redeploy them to their communities, working in the health system now. So they've already achieved 30% of their program goal, and the target is by the end of the year, they'll have hit 50%. They did do this even with needing to adjust the cohort training size for space considerations. They integrated COVID testing, masking, and social distancing into the training programs, and they made sure that the national health system was offering and ensuring that all community health workers had access to the COVID-19 vaccine before being redeployed into their communities. So they could also serve as positive ambassadors of COVID prevention techniques as well. Rotary is officially represented on the End Malaria Now Council. And another wonderful benefit of this program is Rotarians and Rotaractors and district leadership have become very engaged in this program to the extent that they have seen at least 3 new clubs formed in the program implementation areas from people who are inspired by the work of Rotary to eliminate malaria. In this same time frame, the foundation launched the second call for proposals for programs of scale. And so there was a little bit more awareness of this new program of the foundation, and we saw 42 concept notes come into the foundation this year for this second program cycle. It had wide representation with clubs and districts coming together and multi-club action really taking place, integration of Rotaract clubs, integration of Interact clubs, Peace Fellows, a critically important Rotary Action Group, support and commitment to these programs. And so we were just really inspired by all of this action and the mobilization that is happening around this concept of moving quality programming to the next level to achieve a positive change. And to get a little bit of the scope of how global this competition truly is in the Rotary world, these were the proposed implementation locations for these 42 concept notes. And so we saw action across the Rotary world and in parts of the world where many of you may have projects or programming or Rotary friends. One of the main messages that I wanted to bring to you all today is, besides feeling inspired and just really proud of the amazing work of your fellow Rotarians in service, international service, is that preparing to scale is not limited to programs of scale. With that in mind, back in May, we launched a program series that is now available in the Rotary Learning Center. It's a 3-part series that we hope to continue to add to in thinking about scaling and quality service programming. The first I really want to highlight here for those who are thinking about what does scale mean? How do I think about it in my program design? Is Scaling Impact for Transformative Change by Larry Cooley. In his talk, Larry presents a scaling framework with 3 concrete steps that he knows that everyone needs to go through to really prepare for scaling. In his talk, he really highlights that step 2 is a place where many people skip over or move through very quickly, but that this is truly the essential step in looking at building ownership, building in the right stakeholders, building in the right partners, and establishing preconditions for scaling, and he would say sustainability. He also walks viewers through some key questions that anyone, any size project can be looking at when they're thinking about a scaling strategy. So I really invite people to reflect on this and look at these sessions and come back with ideas on where any project, from your local community project to your largest international service projects, could be thought of with a scaling strategy in mind. Larry also presents a scaling toolkit, but we also have added a few resources here that are outside of the MSI framework. In InFocus, if you are interested in scaling health programming in particular, though it is a body of research and work and toolkits and guidance that is open to any sector, but really specializes in the health sector. ExpandNet has wonderful resources. And for those who are interested in education programming, the Brookings Institution and the Center for Universal Education have put out tools and resources around millions learning, really how to think about bringing effective education programming to all in need. When you're thinking about programs of scale specific resources, I invite you to look at the Rotary.org Programs of Scale website page, because there we have a grant competition handbook that lays out the criteria that I went through, the process, Rotary's vision around programs of scale. And we also then cross-reference you to the other tools and resources that I've mentioned. And what we ask anyone to think about or to really consider as early as you are or as midterm as you are in a program cycle is to really consult within your district resource network. this is what helps make a Rotary project a true Rotary project. How do you get the advice from the cadre? How do you mobilize and work with what the action groups are seeing? How do you use Rotary program alumni, former fellows, former scholars in supporting your work? The District Resource Network should also have contacts with local community experts, contact information with potential partnering organizations. And so that District Resource Network should be a rich source of information for Rotarians. And then again, if you have been interested in learning more about programs of scale and want to do it in a different way, the Rotary magazine did a fantastic spread in the May issue of the US version of Rotary magazine, and really walked through the vision and gave highlights of the different types of applicants who came in across the areas of focus. With that, I would like to share the email address that it is easiest to contact me or my team member with, and I believe John will also put this in the chat shortly. And happy to move on.
Hello, Sarah. It's Cheryl with some questions that have already been sent in for you. In fact, one of them you'll find is already been answered. But first of all, from Eve Conway, a question: how will programs of scale improve Rotary's impact and public image?
Great question. So we see it at multiple levels. Programs of scale was created as part of increasing Rotary's impact in really taking member-led programs that truly have a Rotary face to them and bringing them to the next level with strong measurement systems. So I talked about the learning agenda, but how do we get to a learning agenda? It is with teams who are looking not just at the inputs or the dollars or the time that they've put in, they're looking at the outputs, what's been created through the program, and the outcomes. What is that positive change that's happening? How do we know malaria is actually being reduced? Do we have the data to support that our activities have made a positive change in the world and are being sustained in the communities that we hope to serve? So from an increasing our impact, we'll have access to stronger data and stronger learning that we can share across the Rotary world. We know Rotarians love sharing their learning individually and on a club-to-club basis, but the foundation has not been as strong in this area of sharing back the learning across service activities. And so we really hope to strengthen that to help strengthen the membership access to Rotary learning. Our public image, it was critical that these programs be member-led. There are fantastic organizations around the world doing fantastic work that could do it without Rotary and are interested in the funds that Rotary supports. So it was really critical looking at how the members are engaged in this program, why the partners see the members as essential to achieving the change and want to do it with Rotary, not just any organization with funding. And so with that, we thought that that would be part of the public image of Rotary is essential to the change story. And that can show up locally, as we're seeing in clubs being formed in Zambia. And it can show up globally in that organizations see the value of working with Rotarians.
Absolutely. Sarah, you illustrated so beautifully in your talk the answer to the question, but it was a pre-asked question. So, you know, kind of you'd already answered it and you have the next one, which was actually how many programs are agreed annually. So the two questions sent in, you've answered fantastically well already. So if I hand back to John, he'll have been watching the Q&A to see what's come in this evening.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl, for posing those, and thank you for the answers, Sarah. I've had a few questions. I'd just like, if I may, just take a little pause. I didn't get to say earlier on that if you've got questions for Sarah of any nature related to programs of scale, if you type them into Q&A, and then I'll pose them to Sarah. I can maybe group them and work our way through those for the rest of the session of the talk. I've got a few questions already, and 2 or 3 more coming up as we're going. So let me get into this. Sarah, you mentioned the concept of partnerships being very strong, partnerships with the local community. Is the partnership primarily about trying to find money to contribute to the project? What other links, what other support are we looking for from the partners?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Some partnerships do exchange resources, and so money is important. But that is not the sole reason why partnerships should happen. Partnerships should be about adding value in a unique way, in a way that helps solve the problem. So of course, money does help solve the problems sometimes, but really thinking about the networks, the trust, the access to expertise, the past experience, the future ability to move into new programming areas. So really looking across the needs of the goal that you're trying to achieve and making sure that you're filling in the blanks with partners that make a difference. Sometimes I advise people to think about what are your most critical risks, what could make this program really not work. And if you are thinking through those critical risks, sometimes filling in those blanks with partners who already have that expertise or can help bridge that risk is a really strategic way to go. Also, partners at that local community level are essential for buy-in and continued trust, communication. Change is tough. We all experienced that over the past 2 years. It's tough. We have to do it sometimes. Sometimes we don't have to do it, or we choose not to follow the required change processes. And so how do you continue to work and build out that coalition of people who have a common vision for change and are willing to bring any tools and resources, including financial, to making that change real?
Thank you. Next question was, we did have some concept notes submitted from clubs in Great Britain and Ireland. Was there a common theme amongst those that were not invited to go on to the next stage?
Let's see, a common theme. I think a common theme across the application pool, and I tried to stress it a bit in the concept note phase, in discussing what is a concept note for programs of scale, is there were amazing programs, amazing ideas, amazing innovations that came forward. So the issue wasn't necessarily in the idea. The issue is the program model proven in a way that it will let anyone, the foundation trustees, know that if this is the one selected program, in 3 to 5 years, we will be truly celebrating the success of the program because it's a tested and tried model that has worked and will work at the next level. So building that confidence with your evidence base, with the right piloting, with the right partners, with the right community buy-in. So I think it's more of a general assessment, not pointing specifically to the teams that came from your region. But that's more or less what we were seeing.
Thank you. Now, next one, is there any reason that a program of scale grant could not be applicable to community development here in GB&I? Were any of the, and so I suppose it's a supplementary, were any of the proposals taken forward to the next stage based in any of the more developed countries, or is this primarily going to end up, will this be primarily targeted at less developed countries?
Excellent question. I think when I showed the implementation map or implementation location map, it was also to highlight it truly was and is a global competition. And one thing that's very different from global grants, so I will get to your answer, but I wanted to highlight this, is an international sponsor is not required for programs of scale. So yes, there can be a project or a program that is locally driven and locally happening in your region. We did see that in many cases where many people did still try and have international partners, but as it was not a program requirement, some of the times the programs were coming from a district in the country where the program was proposed to be implemented. There is one team in this year's competition who was invited for full proposal that does come from Europe, and the program is European based.
Interesting. So there's a challenge we're keen to move to getting some of our programs working in the UK on a scaled up basis. So I'm pleased to hear that answer too. Thank you. Perhaps linking to some of the points you made before, in these programs, is Rotary branding mandatory? It is for other forms of grants. What's the answer for programs of scale?
Yeah, so that is a fantastic question. In fact, we take Rotary branding to the next level with a program of scale, in that the final program name does get to be locked up with the Rotary Master Brand signature. So because in many cases, this is multi-club, multi-district efforts to support a program, it becomes branded as a Rotary program with the program name for programs of scale. And so yes, Rotary branding is required and essential. And in fact, it's the Rotary branding, not the local Rotary branding, that is utilized.
Thank you. Mike Osborne's asking, will programs of scale be ongoing for a finite time?
Let's hope no. But no, the program was approved by the trustees of the Rotary Foundation as an annual program. So it is an annual program. At this point, the trustees have only approved one program per year at $2 million. So we are looking at ways of bringing in external funding to co-invest with Rotary on programs of scale. So that is something we are hoping to do in the coming years to grow this program even further.
Thank you. Peter Patel's asking how you assess quality and return on investment for such programs.
Great question. So many people, and even the selection committee, we had conversations around cost per beneficiary, or looking at, and I'm assuming, and please push if I haven't answered the question. I'm talking at the actual investment level. So looking at cost per beneficiary, but because we're looking across all of the areas of focus, and some interventions inherently cost more upfront or are more infrastructure based, looking at cost per beneficiary is important. It's important for scalability. It's important for understanding sustainability, but it's not the only answer. And so we try to look at cost per benefit. So not per person, but for the benefits. So extrapolating that, a life without polio has cost significant savings. And so the cost to administer polio is one thing, but the cost of a life without polio is significantly even more impressive. And so looking at the benefits that will be gained from the program, we're trying to do more over the cost per beneficiary.
It's almost as though you've already read the next question, because that goes on to say, John Elford Box asking, is the campaign that presently exists for End Polio Now to be mirrored in what he's calling here the End Malaria Now project?
That's a great question. Not at the Rotary level as the corporate signature program. We are focused on polio. Polio is the sole corporate signature program of Rotary. But what I will say is the Rotarians in Zambia learned and modeled their intervention after the success of polio elimination in Zambia, and what they learned in being advocates, volunteers, building mobilization, strengthening health systems. That said, the next program of scale may not be in the health sector at all. It will not be in malaria. There are no candidates for malaria. And so programs of scale is really about lifting up the member-led programming that's ready for that next level. And so the foundation is not taking a stance on any one cause, but rather on the programs that are ready to grow.
Thank you. Janine Birtworth will ask a couple of questions, slightly different topics, the two of them. Is there any anticipation that one or more of the Rotarians involved in the present programme, the present award, is there any expectation that they will be giving a talk or a workshop to learn from their experience and help others in making applications?
In specifically helping others to make applications. I've received this question a few times, and I know that they would be open to it. And so, yes, I will just say yes, they will, though something is not yet scheduled. What is scheduled is they gave a talk that I can share the recording as a follow-up to this. They gave a talk on how they started with programs of scale, what led them to programs of scale. And they are planning a talk for December of this year on progress to date. So doing their own mid-year progress report for the program and being very as transparent as possible about the lessons learned to date. And so as soon as I have that information too, I'll pass it along to this group.
Good, thank you. And Janine's other question it's actually touching on a point that you and I discussed the other day. As there is only one program of scale per year, how can we help and encourage those that are not successful, perhaps even those that haven't applied, to still have a bigger impact and scale up their work, wherever it might be?
Yeah, great. So the tools and resources that we put together really wasn't to build this greater group to compete for programs of scale. It was to build this scaling mindset amongst Rotarians and think about the different ways that they can bring their programming that works to the next set of people, because Rotarians want to make a positive impact with your service. So inspiring people to do that can still be done through global grants if you are accessing Rotary funding, because as I mentioned, the Zambia team continues to actually apply for global grants to continue scaling. They use programs of scale to accelerate what they were doing, but they were already doing it, and they plan to keep doing it until Zambia is malaria free. So the idea, and I referred to Larry's talk, I really do encourage you, and I know John watched it and enjoyed it as well, but he really says, fall in love with the problem, not with the solution, because if you are thinking about the problem and how to stop that problem from continuing to occur, you will find creative ways of working on projects, finding the next innovations, attaching to the research, contributing to the research and evidence base, and finding support for that, whether it's through Rotary funding, external funding, a combination of the two.
Thank you. Maya Spoilders, sorry Maya for pronouncing your name incorrectly. She asks, can any Rotarian make an application individually, or does it need to be a Rotary club? Does it need to involve the district as well? I'll just extend her question a little. And she asks this as some Rotarians in her club have set up a charity to scale the project so far done by the club.
Great question. So all programs of scale applications must either be sponsored by a club or district. Sponsored by a club or district can take different forms, but the grants go to a club or a district, as those are who are qualified by the Rotary Foundation to receive Rotary funding. We also see it as a critical piece in ensuring that it stays a member-led program and a member-owned program. And so finding the ways to mobilize Rotarians outside of the club and larger than your district is also critical. But that funding that can then go to match other funding from other organizations. So the funding does need to go to a qualified club or district. But if you have set up a separate foundation or charity to also work on programming efforts, there are ways to match that funding.
Thank you. A couple of questions about how these relate to global grants. Is there the same sort of partnership required with actually I think you've already answered this earlier, partnership with an overseas partner? I think you said that's not a necessary condition. But the other part of this this question that Mike Osborne's asked is, does the award depend on the project having not started? So in global grants, there's a limitation that the Rotary Foundation can't fund a project that's already underway. Does that apply?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of nuance to that question. So a project may have started, but to put it into a grant application, you have to pick a start date of the grant and an end date of the grant, and what results will be achieved during that time frame. And so this idea that a project has started or is being piloted is great. Grant funding cannot go to reimburse project costs that have already been incurred. So that's one of the factors. And second, anything that's been achieved prior to the grant start date would be considered pre-work. And so results would be from the day of the start of the grant to the day of the end of the grant time period for when you're quantifying the results or what will be additive because the foundation has come to support this program as well.
Right, yes, it's I think for the whole concept of scaling implies that there's been quite a lot of work done already.
Correct.
That's a slightly different position from some global grant projects, yes. Mike Parry does thank you for a great presentation and ask if you could speak a little more on the success criteria measurements, especially on our ability to position Rotary as a world leader in long-term development issues. So,
sure.
We don't have another hour, unfortunately.
No problem. But just to clarify, and I know it's hard to clarify in the Q&A box, but the criteria for programs of scale or why programs of scale was created?
I think I'm reading this as being success criteria for those who actually went through to the further consideration and eventually won the.
Okay. So we were not preferencing, or we continue to not preference, if something is hyper-local in nature, that is okay. But how is it building on Rotary's ability to make a positive change and demonstrate how Rotarians can make a positive change, which has a global message. In learning on how Rotarians are engaged in positive service and doing that through demonstrated, not just the numbers, but the actual change story that happened because of Rotary's involvement, is what then helps elevate us to that larger international, or continues to keep us actually, because you're there. It's very clear, but getting to that next level with programming outside of polio and being known for Rotarians are the go-to for education. Rotarians are the go-to for making sustainable access to water and sanitation. Rotarians are peace builders, and it's demonstrated through and using these programs as clear examples with clear metrics of positive change.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions here on timescales. The straightforward one is, what are the timescales for making a step 1 application? And then that was from Robert Muir. And then Jeff Males asked, Sarah, can you advise on the time frame of the Zambia grants from conception to submission and then approval?
Sure thing. So we hope to keep the same cadence of the annual competition as we have this year. And so launching at international convention each year, that the concept note period has officially opened and you can start filling it out in the system, and closing it in August of each year with the goal of having an award decision by the trustees of the foundation around March of each year to be able to announce the awardee at international convention again each year. So that's the program cycle that we are hoping to keep with now. I know from the first competition to the second competition, there was a change in timing. But now with the launch of the second competition, that is the timing that we hope to continue with each year. We plan to have an updated Programs of Scale handbook available with that exact time frame by February, early March.
Thank you. This is the question about the types of programs that you're having applications for already, and what sort of programs are you having from Rotary Action Groups? Eve Conway is part of a Rotary Action Group for endangered species, and they're thinking about a program of scale grant. Excellent.
Before I could address the Rotary Action Group, I forgot to address the second part of your question. The Zambia program is a 3.5-year program. So they officially kicked off at the end of March in 2021. So 3.5 years from that date. Though they plan to have all training fully completed by May of next year, so that the last 2 or so years are on monitoring the success and continued work of the community health workers and their integration into the health system. Rotary Action Groups.
Thank you.
Yes, Rotary Action Groups, I mentioned at least 8 had participated in some capacity in the concept note phase for this last cycle. And 2 of the 4 that moved on to the next stage are engaged with Rotary Action Groups for this program cycle. So we saw some really positive engagement from Rotary Action Groups. We continue to encourage that, as Rotary Action Groups are strong groups that bring together people not just with technical expertise, but with a passion for a cause. And again, this idea of mobilizing the best of Rotary around volunteerism, around technical expertise, around partners. We see Rotary Action Groups as being very strong hubs for that work. And so would highly encourage, though really want to stress that where the program is going to take place should really be a hub for Rotarian action. The local representation of Rotarians is very important. Again, when we're talking about public image and the ability to show the power of Rotary. And so wherever you plan to implement a program, those Rotary clubs and districts should be fully engaged.
Thank you. We have someone who's perhaps exploring an idea around something they developed as a proof of concept already. We here in District 1040 is Julie Thompson. we here in District 1040 have piloted an idea and have rolled out 10 projects as proof of concept. We have a 2-year buy-in from an incubator organisation with another 6 projects in the pipeline. I imagine her question, which she hasn't had time to type out, is does this have at least the beginnings of an asset idea around the program and scale application?
Yeah, in theory, it sounds like the right process. I would just encourage, feel free to reach out directly, but also I would encourage you to look at the resources that I shared today and go through some of those questions in the toolkits and in the guidance, and think about it a little bit, and then I'm happy to engage. But I think it's really a self-reflection most of the time with your team on, are you ready? Can you answer these questions? Have you assembled the right level to move forward?
Good, thank you. Brian Stoyle, one of our Rotarians down in the southwest, he has been working very hard for many, many years on malaria elimination in Tanzania. I'll say Tanzania. I hope that's right. Remit. He's saying, succeeding with a malaria grant in Zambia, will this in any way bar the acceptance of another malaria grant in another part of Africa?
It will not bar another grant of malaria in Africa. It also will not ensure another grant for programs of scale for malaria in Africa. So I think it's both sides. It's bringing the best programs that are ready to make that positive change and understanding the competitive nature of Rotarians and programs of scale right now.
Thank you. And John Alford Box, I think he's got thoughts of whether malaria elimination is going to follow on from polio elimination, which we tackled earlier, but he's also asking, is it anticipated that Gates Foundation might become a partner at some point and be involved with the sort of malaria programs that you talked about today? Not sure how you
Great
want to answer that.
Question. Yeah, great question. So the Gates Foundation is a co-investor, not gathered by Rotary or the foundation, but by the Rotary members themselves in Partners for a Malaria-Free Zambia. So I talked about the $2 million from the Rotary Foundation, but they assembled a $6 million program with $2 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, $2 million from World Vision USA, and $2 million from Rotary for a co-implementation, member-led, Rotary-led implementation, funded also by the Gates Foundation. But they did all of that brokering, application process, mobilization of resource and implementing partners and research partners themselves, and then came to the foundation asking for filling in $2 million for it to become a $6 million program.
Thank you. And one last question we have from Tony Sharma is, will the current program be reported and available to Rotarians for information and future guidance? Do you have any timetables on that?
Yes, so as I mentioned, the first 6 months have officially finished, and so in the next week we gave the team 45 days to close out the books and prepare the report for the first 6 months of implementation. So the foundation will be receiving an official report shortly, and then we will move that into different communications pieces and resource pieces for Rotarians on capturing program learning, capturing program results, so on and so forth. So if there is something that you don't see in the coming months coming out, because the sharing of learning is so critical to this program, to programs of scale, and especially as they are the first awardee, all eyes are on them. If there's something you don't see coming out from us that you'd love to see, please do share that as well, because similarly, the how did they apply for programs of scale was not on our mind as much as, are they getting results from their programming? And so we've been more focused on that, but we are happy to work with them. We meet very often to talk about how to share the learning. So please keep us accountable to what you want to know more about.
Thank you, Sarah. That completes the questions that we've time to ask this afternoon, and thank you for the very full and explanatory answers. That's fleshed out things extremely well. I'm really impressed with this program's at scale, partly because of the award itself, but you also touched on the thought that this is about encouraging and supporting Rotarians in thinking about scaling up our work in the communities where we do work. So important, have so much more impact on the communities. It projects the value of Rotary to our communities so much more as well. So I'd encourage everyone, even if you're not thinking necessarily of being straight in with a $1 million grant from Sarah and the foundation and the trustees, at least be thinking about the concepts of scaling up that have gone on here. So thank you again, Sarah, and we hope that you'll see plenty of action from GB&I now.
No, thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing from you all.
Not at all. Good night. I'm going to hand over to Cheryl now to introduce our next topic.
Thank you, John. Our next session on Thursday, December the 9th at 5 o'clock. Our speaker is Darren Moss-Dalmu, and he will talk about peace, inspiration and action. Darren is a UN legal and political advisor, having worked in Afghanistan and Bangladesh. He is passionate about our Rotary Peace Centres and also about the way that Rotary contributes to the building of a more peaceful world through our service projects. We do hope you will join us to hear Darren and his inspirational talk. Thank you.